The following video has been brought to you by RYN Studios. Release your nerd. Hello everyone, my name is the King of Clubs and welcome to another episode of List It. In this episode, we're going to be counting down the top 10 most common fears in the world. Alright, let's get started with the countdown with number 10. Number 10 is social phobia. Social phobia is actually referring to people who have a fear of speaking or embarrassing themselves in front of a large group of people. Very common phobia. I myself actually am not a huge fan of speaking in front of large groups of people, which is why I'm actually more comfortable doing YouTube videos than I am public speaking. This happens to a lot of people in the world. It's very, very common, and people use different tricks and tactics to overcome this fear. Some people just practice speaking in front of small groups and gradually working up. Other people just pretend that the audience is actually not even there. There's all types of methods to handling this fear, and there's people who still have problems overcoming it. There's nothing wrong with it, it's perfectly logical. Moving on to number 9 is going to be injections or needles. This is another fear that I myself have. I've never liked needles. I've never been a fan of going to the doctor or to the dentist if I know I'm going to have an injection of some form. It's another very common fear. A lot of people, especially children, typically are afraid of needles and injections. I've always believed that if you enjoy it, then there's probably something wrong with you. Alright, moving on to number 8 is storms. Another one that's common mostly in children or people of younger age. Storms usually make people very uneasy. It could be from thunder, it could be from heavy winds, heavy rain, precipitation, or the possibility of something more severe like a tornado. I live out in the middle of the United States, so we have tornadoes and heavy rain all the time. And it's very common for people around here to become afraid of storms. It's also very common for people to go storm chasing around here, so we get a little bit of people that have the fear of it and people who are excited by it. Moving on to number 7 is snakes. Snakes is another fear. This is actually a fear that I don't have. I've always thought the snakes were cool, but there are a lot of people who are terrified of snakes. There are various characters like movies and TV shows, like for example in the Indiana Jones series, Indiana Jones himself is actually terrified of snakes. He hates snakes. Let's see, moving on to number 6 would be dogs. This is a fear I have a hard time comprehending myself because I love dogs. I believe it mostly stems from people who have had a bad experience as a child with a dog. And then there are other people who are just intimidated by an animal that could be the same size as them, if not larger. I get that. There's nothing wrong with having a fear of dogs. The only problem I ever have with a fear is if it makes you so irrational that you become violent towards what you're afraid of. That's when I think the fear has gotten out of control for a person. Again, I personally love dogs. Obviously, this is not a fear that I have, but I have seen people who have this fear. I actually know of a few people off the top of my head that have a fear of dogs, namely larger dogs, but dogs nonetheless. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 is the fear of heights. I have a fear similar to this. I actually have the fear of falling off of things. So, not necessarily a fear of heights for me personally, but the knowledge of me falling off of something from a high point is very similar to that fear. Now, the fear of heights itself is very, very common. I know a lot of people who have it, a lot of friends, relatives, and so forth. I know a lot of people that are afraid of heights, and it's perfectly logical, very understandable. I know people that actually, just from watching a video or seeing a picture of something that's taken from a high place, actually start getting sick. Nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of ways you can cope with that. There's several things that you can do. For one, I recommend not going onto top of a tall building. Let's see here. moving on, the countdown to number 4 is clowns. Another very common fear. I'm not really afraid of clowns. I do find their overly happy personas a bit disturbing, but not necessarily afraid of them. I know people that are actually afraid of clowns. Actually know quite a few people, to be honest with you, that are afraid of clowns, and for various reasons. Sometimes it's from a movie that they saw as a little kid, sometimes it's from just a bad experience they had at a circus. It could be a number of things. It could just be sort of me. They're freaked out by the fact that it's a person with a painted face running up all happy and jolly and cheerful, getting up in your personal business. Moving on now. Number 3 is death. A very common fear is the fear of dying. I'm not really afraid of this, mainly because I've come to the same conclusion that a lot of people have, and I understand that it's something that's going to happen eventually. Death is very common, as is the fear of it. Some people are afraid of dying, not so much how it will come about, more so I think it's the fear of running out of time, not being able to enjoy life the way that they want to enjoy it before their time comes. That's perfectly logical. There's nothing wrong with being a fear of running out of time. I'm obsessed with time because of that, but I'm not afraid of running out of time as far as death goes. I'm afraid of running out of time, and then I don't have enough hours in the day to do everything I want to do in a single day. But yeah, fear of death is very common. Mostly I believe people are afraid that they're not going to enjoy life the way they want to, but there are some that are afraid of death just of how it will happen and how it's going to come about, because you never know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, where it will happen. So it's kind of a self-conscious thing, I believe. Alright, moving on to number 2. Number 2 is the fear of tight spaces, also known as claustrophobia. Now, I'm not a huge fan of being in tight spaces. I'm not necessarily claustrophobic. I can handle the tight space up to a point. And that's as long as I feel like I have enough room to breathe. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people that are claustrophobic, is they get so tight inside the tight space that they feel like they can't breathe. They start hyperventilating, and their body starts spazzing out on them. Nothing wrong with people that are claustrophobic. I know a lot of them. Being a bigger guy, there are times when you think I would be claustrophobic. And there have been times where I've had moments where I've been a bit freaked out about space because I didn't feel like I could breathe. Very common fear. Nothing wrong with it at all. Various methods of coping with it. Most people have to take baby steps, as with most fears, take baby steps into getting used to that scenario. I'm not too sure why you'd want to get used to being in a tightly enclosed space, but to each their own in that respect. Alright, moving on to our number 1 pick. It's a very common one, and honestly a lot of people probably already guessed it by now. It is spiders. Not a huge fan of spiders myself. I'm not as afraid of them as other people are. I'm more freaked out by sudden movements than I am of actual spiders. Once I actually have seen one and see where it's at, I can then assess the situation as need be. But if I can't see it, or if it surprises me, then yeah, I spaz out. I turn to a little girl all of a sudden. A lot of people are afraid of spiders. Arachnophobia is probably one if not the most common fears in the world. Really not any way of avoiding spiders. I mean, you can go to colder climate areas, but there's still going to be some form of arachnid out in various parts of the world. But, you know, nothing wrong with spiders. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of them. And when you consider that there's a portion of spiders that are venomous, yeah, it's very legitimate. There are people that have gotten seriously hurt and even died from being bit by spiders. So it's a very understandable fear. Alright, that actually wraps up the countdown. I just want to let everyone know that today's video ran about the same length as usual. Tomorrow I'm going to hopefully do a little bit longer video. Also tomorrow I plan on having a vlog to kind of update everybody on what's going on with the channel. just to kind of give everybody a little update as to where we're at, where we're going, some new ideas that I've got. I've got a lot of exciting news that I want to fill you all in on, but I'm going to wait and save that for tomorrow and put that in my blog, because I'll have a lot more time to do that tomorrow than I do today. But yeah, thanks guys for watching the video. Be sure to like, favorite, share, comment on this video, subscribe to the channel. Check me out on social media. I've got my Facebook, my Twitter, my Snapchat, all that is set up in the description below. And you guys have yourselves a nice day.